I will admit, life after school is a little weird because you spend the first 12 years, if not 16 to 17, if you go to like university, where you have to ask to like go to the bathroom. But the next day after you graduated, then people are asking like, "Hey, what do you get set up for your 401k? Are you set up for retirement? When you buying a house? When you settling down? When you gonna have kids?" And honestly, this is a really jarring transition at times where we're not all prepared for what life after school actually means for us. So let's be honest here. It's not so much that the day to day is really that new once we get out of school. But instead, it's more so how you get put on the spot where you have to sound like you don't spend every evening watching The Bachelor or Love Island and playing the latest Fortnite variation. But I think ultimately that's where the most fun and value can actually lie in figuring out how to make the most of our life, especially as we're transitioning from schooling into the next phase of our early career. So, keeping everything simple, let's talk about that. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. So, welcome to another episode of The Learning Curve. So, this is just one of the segments that we do on the show where we kind of discuss different questions and ideas and kind of boil them down again into these root actionable tips that we can actually use in our day-to-day lives versus a kind of hypothetical. So, the first part here is, why does it matter? Why does it matter that life after school can feel kind of weird? And I've kind of boiled it down to the fact that you spend 12 years in primary education. I'm calling primary education your elementary school, middle school, and high school years. And then that's just the minimum. But if you go on to secondary education, if you go on to university, community college, trade school, you got another 2 to 4, 5 years on average. And that all depends on like the specialization that you choose to go into, because you can have another decade worth of schooling, and then you got schooling that has to continue every single year after that. So life after school can still involve a lot of school. But because it takes longer depending on your career of choice, then, like I said, that can make the transition feel a bit jarring. Because if you've spent so long within academia, so long within just school, when you actually start taking on other parts of your adult life, it can feel like you knew they were coming, but you're not 100% certain how to deal with them because you've been dealing with writing an essay deadline rather than dealing with a client deadline for so long. And real quick, if you are enjoying this episode so far and finding value in it, it would mean so much to me if you do like and subscribe to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast wherever you're listening to us right now, whether on YouTube, Spotify, wherever else. It does help me out so much. But on that, let's get right back into it. So, this is a little bit of story time then. I would call these 4 points as probably the biggest transition points, or the biggest kind of contrast that you'll have between when you're in school and when you're going about your daily life after school. The first one is this thing called the influx of free time. Now, is it as fancy as it sounds? No, it truly is. Literally, you have this sudden increase in what you can spend your time on and what you have the ability to dedicate your time towards. Gone are the nights where you have to spend 4, 5, 6 hours working on homework. Gone are the nights where you have to do these really long group projects where you're getting a bunch of people together and you're hammering out a presentation. I mean, that still exists in some capacity, but that tends to be during work hours. Now, once that kind of clock hits and you're able to clock out, you actually don't have the responsibility of, oh, I have more work to do at home, or I have to have literal homework to do anymore. There still is that easier transition to say, okay, I've done my work for the day. I'm able to go home, and what do I do next? What do I spend my time on? So like I mentioned earlier, some people might just want to zone out, plop down, and watch Love Island or play the latest Fortnite or X Defiant, whatever it is. But ultimately, you have so much more free time than you actually know what to do with in the beginning. And it can be a little bit overwhelming because sometimes you don't want to feel like I'm not doing anything with it. And so that's where the hobbies come in. That's where the spending time with friends come in. That's where so many other things that you had to put off a little bit more when you were in school can suddenly come back into the picture. But now it's about finding the right balance between sectioning off that free time. And the next part here then is career conversations. It's the constant question of what happens next. Where are you going next? Because once you graduate, you're going to get hit with that question so much. Someone wants to know, well, did you get an internship? Did that internship lead to a job? Well, if you didn't get a job before you graduated, well, what are you going to do next? Where are you going? What's up? What's happening? When are you going to start getting paid? And when are you going to start putting money away into retirement? And what field and expertise do you want to have? And these questions, again, get overwhelming. But having the career conversations is a continual trend throughout just the rest of your life, because whether it is you having a conversation with your boss of, hey, I would like to work towards this next promotion. How do you recommend I do this? How do you recommend that I actively make the most progress in getting to point B within the next 3 years? Or it can be having a conversation with your spouse, your partner of, I want to go into this field. I want to go into accounting. I want to go into graphic design, but I don't know where to start. There's so many aspects to the career conversation that we have to remember. We are consistently building our careers after school. I mean, within school too, you can make dedicated effort to get the right internships, do the right work study jobs on campus, or even just work in general while you're going to school. But having the conversation will consistently happen. And it's just something to be prepared for and understand that, okay, people want to know where I want to go next. So that means I also have to know where I want to go next. So I do recommend that you think about that one while you're in school, because then you have more time where you're allowed to dedicate exploration towards your interests, towards your hobbies, that can further help you understand what the career conversation is going to look like after the fact. The next point is kind of a problem, and that is keeping up with the Joneses. Now, I say it's kind of a problem because we are mostly aware that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to other people around us, but we consistently fall into the comparison trap. We consistently fall into the category of, wow, my classmate from Business 101 suddenly has this awesome internship, and they suddenly are getting the company car, and it's only been a couple years after we've got out of school. And now they have a raise, and it looks like they're buying a house. And it's like, oh, wait. And now my other friend, or my other random class friend from Accounting 101 is getting married. And then it's someone from my random ceramics and pottery class had a baby. I'm pausing there because I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it can feel like that, especially for those of us in Gen Z, in which we are getting married later in life. Most people are putting that major life decision to do things like get married, have kids to later in life because we want to have more financial freedom or have more financial stability before we actually make that leap. But this is where the keeping up with the Joneses becomes so much of an issue, is that you don't want to have the major concern be, okay, I feel like I'm falling behind. I feel like I am not living up to my potential, what people are expecting of me. I'm not. It's like for other people, it's like I'm not married yet, or it's like I don't have that big fancy title, or I haven't even put a down payment on a house yet. How do you even buy a house? And then you have someone who's like putting so much towards their retirement, or someone who just went on a year-long vacation through Europe, and I don't even know how they afforded that. And then it's just all about bringing it back down to the fact that we are comparing ourselves most likely when we are looking at what other people have or have done and what we're doing now. I mention this a lot as schooling and life and just in general, it's all being run at your own pace because someone is doing something that's super cool and super fantastic. You don't need to beat yourself up and say, wow, why can't I do that? Because everyone's running a race at their own pace and with their own time. And I don't want someone to feel like, okay, I have to do XYZ. I have to get married. I have to settle down. I have to get that next promotion. I have to buy that new car because everyone else is doing it. Instead, it's about finding what matters to you and why do you want to pursue it, so that way when those decisions come up and when it's time to make them, then you can do so with the utmost confidence in yourself that it is for yourself, not for anyone else, not for your friends, not for your teachers, not for your parents, but it's for you. And the next piece here then becomes keeping up with friends. So like I mentioned, one of the big transition pieces here is that you have so much free time now. And friendships take work. Staying connected with your friends takes work. It's not just a matter of, well, they never reach out to me, so I should never reach out to them because I got to wait for someone else to be the first one to reach out because, well, if they don't, then are they even really a good friend? It's no. You have to remember that all your relationships, all your friendships are a two-way street. You got to give some to get some. You got to be willing to give your time before you can even think or expect about someone else being willing to give you their time. And if you want to maintain a good, close friendship with somebody, then you have to make sure that you are, I would think of it like a plant. This is going to be a really weird analogy, but roll with me here, okay? Think of it like a plant where if you don't give it the right nutrients, if you don't water it properly, if you don't put it in the right environment, then it's not going to grow and it's not going to flourish. Relationships and friendships are the exact same. If you don't put in the right amount of effort, if you don't dedicate time towards getting the right environment put together and consistently watering it or consistently spending quality time and communications with those people, then it's going to fizzle out or it's going to simply stagnate and not grow any further. So your friendships, keeping up with friends is so important to your life after school, especially because there is the continual loneliness endemic that we all suffer through, where we are more connected than ever through our phones, through our computers, and just through the internet as a whole and social media. But we're also more isolated than ever because we are getting the highlight reels of everyone's lives. We are getting what the best of the best we want to show the world. And we can forget that, hey, maybe behind that awesome little brunch photo that someone posted, maybe they had a super rough morning that they didn't tell anyone about, or I never asked about because I just saw the brunch photo and them chugging down 5 mimosas. But this is what I mean in that you have to make sure that you are properly keeping up with your friends especially the ones that you want to maintain close relationships with. And this then leads me on to the next segment here of what is the public point of view here. Like, the general point of view is that you should be prepared for these things. And this is why I would say we would call ourselves like baby adults, quote unquote, because when we are leaving university, there is that transition. Like, it's hard to deny that there is this little switch between being a young adult to, or going from like a baby adult to a young adult to, if you see the reel or the TikTok of it, there's looking for an adultier adult, someone that might be our age or might be a little bit older or significantly older, that has it together and looks like they really know what they're doing. And so we feel confident that, oh, wow, we can ask them to help us out with this because they have good answers, they have good insights, and we could use some of that. And I think that that is, again, from the general point of view, why it's so important that we actively do engage with these next sections of our lives in the day to day. Because if we are able to then think about, okay, am I properly building up the foundation for the multiple pillars I want to have in my life? So the pillars of careers, the pillars of finance, of friendships, of health, of relationships. And then going from these pillars of building up the ones that are important to you, are we properly dedicating mental space to them? Are we properly dedicating our time learning about them? Because if you're lucky, or rather if you're intentional about it, you will find out what a 401k is while you're in school. You will find out, or you'll have a personal finance class on how to buy a car or how to buy a house, how to pay rent and whatever else. And if you can find classes like that, highly recommend taking them. But just in general, if you're able to find those resources, then it's going to make that transition feel so much easier, because as a whole, we know that we're entering the working world a lot more fully after school. And so it becomes important that you don't let the overwhelm stay as the predominant or the main feeling. You want to feel like, as you are growing, as you are learning and getting smarter and more experienced every single year, that you are feeling more settled, feeling more stable, and feeling more confident in your abilities to answer the questions on your own as well. And honestly, for myself, I would say that the biggest thing that I think really messes with your mind after school, though, is just how much you come to expect of yourself too. Because gone again are the days in which you are getting to spend late nights writing essays or going on late night adventures with friends. And instead it's replaced with, okay, I get to choose to do this in a way that is meaningful to me, because I still got work tomorrow at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And we all know that most people hated the 8 a.m. classes, unless you were like me and you were a morning person. But in general, people tend to regret doing it. But now it's, I got to show up because I got to, one, make money to live, and two, I got to work to live as well. And that's why I think it messes with us so much, is that the time that we have after school definitely kind of almost gets away from us in a way if we aren't careful about it. And when I say gets away from us, I more so mean we know what our class schedule was. We know what we were choosing to do, and we know how our time was going to be spent likely afterwards. Whereas now it becomes so much more open. It becomes so much more filled with possibilities that we have to make sure that we aren't letting it just slip away and not go utilized. Not spending it towards, again, the things that matter. If we're spending it towards our friends, or spending it towards our relationships, if we're spending it towards our hobbies, our interests, our passions. And I think that ultimately, with leaving school, you're going to encounter these changes so much that it's going to feel like a roller coaster. But because it does, that means you're in for one heck of a ride if you go along with it. With that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to us on a podcasting app, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating. It helps me out so much, and I do greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions in regards to life after schooling and what that means, or any comments on what I talked about today, leave them in the comments below, because Spotify now has comments too. So comment below if you're on YouTube, Spotify, wherever it is. But I hope you have an amazing day, you amazing people, and I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.